Hello, I am the Rhythmic biker. And did you know a blood biker got an urgent heart transplant across London in less than an hour to help save a waiting patient's life? And that over 4,500 volunteers keep the National Association of Blood Bikers up and running. Last episode, we were joined by DJ Supreme, who gave us an insight into the possible future of motorcycles with his electric Harley-Davidson Livewire. In this episode, we're joined by an Italian stallion. These are the wolf tails. What would your advice be to someone who has never tried motocross before?
Don't do it. Hello, my name's Andrew. I am a NHS doctor and self-acclaimed petrolhead. Today I've brought along my Ducati Streetfighter V4S, but also have to mention my workhorse, which is the Kawasaki Z650, which is my day-to-day commuter. I think some of you might recognise me as Motor Medic on Instagram, but other than that, I'm just sort of bimble around Milton Keynes and drinking coffee and riding bikes.
So we are joined by Andy, who can be found on Instagram as Moto Medic. And he has kindly brought in his Ducati Streetfighter V4S, a stunning naked street bike with a lot of track heritage. With all that said, let's waste no further time and jump straight in to the deep dive. Hello and welcome to the deep dive. This episode we are joined by Andy, and what have you brought in for us today?
Well, today I brought one of two bikes. This is my pride and joy though. This is the Ducati V4S. It's been with me for about 18 months and it's a bike that I just can't see myself ever selling.
Fantastic. It certainly is striking to the eye, isn't it? The initial reaction is the aggressive looks that Ducati have given this Street Fighter. I've got to ask, first question is, why the Ducati Street Fighter V4S? Why this bike?
I have no idea. Absolutely no idea. It was just one of the bikes that I saw being marketed by Ducati, and I've had the opportunity to ride one or two, and they've all been, you know, monsters. They're just machines, and I just like the look of it. It was something striking about it, the naked look. I don't know, it's just that aggressive and beautiful all in one. And I went down to have a look at it, and I sat on it at Peterborough. And as soon as I sat on it, before they even started it, I knew it was for me. It
was the one. You've obviously, like you say, you've gone to the dealership, had a sit on it. Was this Ducati very focused dealership? So other ones, was this definitely the one? As soon as you sat on it, you just knew it, or was there other Ducati in the range that you thought, oh, I could have done, or was it always this one?
It was one of those that I just showed up, sort of cards close to the chest, just to have a look at. I did the usual, sat on various things and sort of kicked the odd tire of other bikes and didn't really, you know, make much conversation. But it was the bike in the corner that I was, you know, kept looking at, and eventually. I sat on it and I just knew. The feeling, the weight, just everything made me want to go out and ride it. Yeah.
Beautiful. Love at first sight, as they say, I think. You've owned it for 18 months now, it's been with you. Tell us through some of the pros. What's it like to ride?
It's a beautiful ride. It is, you know, despite its sort of aggressive looking nature, and essentially the engine is, Panganali engine pulled out, plucked out and put into a slightly longer frame without the fairings, and you would think, oh, aggressive, sort of difficult to control, but it's not. It's completely the opposite. It's a bike that's so easy to ride and so smooth in traffic that it's not one of those things that you're trying to get through and filter so you can get on the gas and take the weight off the wrist. It's something that you can sit in traffic and be really comfortable for. Equally, the longer rides, an hour and a half, you're comfortable, you don't get a numb bum, and actually the limiting factor is the fuel rather than the comfort.
Obviously, Ducatis have always been renowned for this very specialist item of machinery, very quick, very luxurious, very elegant to the finishing details. But if you had to, would you almost class this could almost be the everyday Ducati? It's all days of the week, maybe even a work commuter?
So I think I could. I have commuted on it a couple of times because that's my other bike I use as a commuter, and I have taken it just because I want to ride it. And it's a bike that you can ride to the shops and be comfortable on, with backpack and all that sort of stuff. In terms of running cost and cost for itself, it would be a very inexpensive commute, to be fair.
Definitely, it is something I'm going to touch on, don't worry about that. You do say it's easy to ride, however, we do obviously have an over 1100cc V4 engine, 208 brake horsepower, 123 newton meters of torque. Those are some eye-watering figures. Is that controllable, or are you just being polite, or is it a bit of a wild horse on that throttle?
It's not, it is, and it's a mix, and that's the beautiful mix. So it is really smooth, the throttle control is super responsive, but when you open it up, the power is there, and it is an absolute beast.
I can only imagine. When I've typed into YouTube for the Ducati Streetfighter V4S, obviously there's so many videos of track experience, and these being a bit of a sort of, not even a secret weapon, but you'd think maybe, against the Paganis, the R1s, maybe then it meets its match, but it just doesn't. It has quite a lot to give. Have you had the opportunity to track it or anything similar like that?
Yeah, so I took the plunge and I've done a couple now, and the most recent one being at Bedford Autodrome, and Bedford's renowned for the long straight at the back, and it's just incredible. Opened it up and the power just kept coming and coming and coming, and your neck sort of trying to hold on, and but it's just incredible, and maybe not as responsive in the corners. It's quite soft going into the corners, but that's something you got used to, and it was a beautiful, beautiful day, to be fair.
Fantastic. Some pretty impressive lap times, I imagine, as well. One of those where you run out of track before you actually run out of power.
Absolutely. There's definitely a sense that I'm not even ashamed to say this has got power and performance that I will never really get to. I mean, I'm not Rossi, I'm not a GP rider, but just to have that power there is an incredible feeling, really.
It's that itch, isn't it? And then on the road, you've got to be a bit more sensible, a bit more down to earth. Obviously, it has got 3 separate riding modes, hasn't it, on it? Street, sport, and race. Is it a case of race mode is a complete weapon that just changes the bike, or do you not notice much different between those modes?
It is, and so you can go into the electronics, and the electronics are, so advanced now. It's leaps and bounds ahead of the previous previous models. So there is a big difference, and I've further customized those settings. So the race setting, you take off the wheelie control, and you take off a couple of the other sort of safety measures, and it is that extra bit of grunt. And with the suspension, the Olin suspension's all sort of adjustable, and it does it itself. So you do notice a bit of a difference between the three, yeah.
I was going to say, getting into very technical specs of the bike, it almost has been set up for track, in my opinion. Like you say, you've got the fully adjustable Olin suspension, you've got Brembo brakes, everything to the detail is refined for track, but that's what would make maybe someone like me think, oh, is that then too hard to control on the road? But you believe that those difference in modes with the electronics, they just bring it almost back down to reality then when it's back on the street.
Yeah, and I think, coming onto the show, I thought about what are the negatives that might come up, and just not prepare or defend, but just think of what I would say. And one of the negatives actually I thought is you think it's going to be an absolute monster, but it's quite soft. So it's easy to ride, and I've never had that I'm going to be ripped off the handlebars moment.
No.
And that's the a downside, but it's not. It's comfortable and it's easy.
This is it. I think it would obviously depend what the person who's buying a naked bike is looking for. The original Ducati Streetfighters from, I think they were released in 2009, were absolutely renowned for almost being they were very performance based, very fast, but a bit of a one-trick pony. They wheelied like there was no tomorrow. I know a lot of work has gone into this with the anti-rotation crank and the more sort of stable chassis now to keep it almost on the floor now. And like you say, it's got wheelie control, trying to plant it. Is it now more difficult, do you think, to get that more hooligan side of riding out?
It is, and it's difficult to get. I'm not one for riding around on the back wheel all the time. But I do get on the back wheel every now and again, and it's really difficult on this. As hard as you try, even with the wheelie control off, it just wants to keep the front down, and it just wants to go fast and straight rather than up and back. So yeah, it's an interesting concept, but they've obviously done a lot of work, and the wings, I've been told, are sort of their secret to it.
I've done some reading myself and known that, yeah, these wings they're meant to, it's always been one for me with Ducatis, because I've always looked at wings on Ducatis and thought, it's great, but if you're not going to utilise, for example, track use, where I imagine these really do come into effect with the downforce, pushing the amount of Gs to try and keep the bike under braking, stable, nice through the corners, do you feel anything from them? Or are they, like some people have said, is it just a show pony thing, or do you really notice them?
I don't know. So it's difficult because I've never taken them off. And actually, when I picked it up, I was like, the one thing I don't necessarily like is the wings, and I might just take them off. And the dealer kind of said, "Oh, no, don't do that. Keep them on." And I have. So I've got used to it, and maybe I'm just spoiled with knowing that I can really twist the grip. And that front is going to stay down, and that's what gives me that little bit of comfort.
Obviously, with a motorcycle, there's always two sides to every puzzle. Have you had any issues with the bike so far in your ownership?
There's been one or two little things. So the under part or the oil sump collects a lot of stone and damage, and it's becoming more and more of an issue, and to the point where actually I've sort of started to design, and you'll be able to see it in some of the films, a sump block. Okay. And it's purely because so this CNC billeted aluminium and anodized black is what's sort of protecting the sump. Within 1,500, 2,000 miles, there's quite a lot of stone and chip damage, and about the 4,000 mile mark, it sort of was on the verge of breaking through. So I approached Ducati, and disappointingly, it wasn't under warranty because it was fair share apparently. So at another eye-watering cost to replace the whole bottom unit. But I suppose that gave me the spark to join up with a friend of mine, and we've built and designed this, and we've gone through sort of several designs, but this is the one that we are now hopefully going to start manufacturing and producing in the next sort of couple of days to weeks, actually.
Fantastic. Do you know anyone else with the Ducati Streetfighter at all, or are you just soloing it at the moment?
I don't. I'm just soloing at the moment. There's Insta friends, the people that you sort of speak to, the strangers on the internet that I was always told not to speak to. And there's a real sort of Ducati Streetfighter family, which is quite nice. But I don't know, or I haven't met anyone in the area.
With them, yeah. Would you think that sort of an innovation like that, this nice little guard to protect that sump, do you think that would be something that a lot of Street Fighter owners would be interested in, just to, like you say, protect that paint, protect then obviously any further damage that could occur?
I think so, and that's hopefully something that we'll bring to market and start punting. And this wasn't a cue to try and plug my new product, but it's something that I think will be valuable. There's one or two that are already out there from the usual big competitors, but it's not a whole cup. So I actually put one of the competitors on, but the chip damage was still happening above it, and that's why we've got the whole line. So we've kept it under wraps because I was just waiting for it to become an official registered part, and we've gone through all the hoops. But I think it will be a valuable product, and for the small price of it, it's going to save you the 900 and something odd pounds I paid to get it replaced. So,
Ducati parts, I'll never understand it. There is obviously around this side of the bike as well, I've noticed on your engine casing here, there are some sort of paint chips as well. So it almost seems like, yes, this would take the brunt of the stone chippings and everything, but obviously we're here in the UK, the road conditions aren't, say, the best. We do get some potholes, we do get some loose chippings here. Is it just because of how the bike's designed, the exposure of everything with a naked bike, that you would expect these sort of paint chippings, or is that something, again, that you think for a Ducati, it's almost too elegant to have that sort of flaw?
I don't know, and I think it's been a bit disappointing that some of the magnesium or the paint that's come over, the overcoating is starting to chip. I think these little chips and these little bits of damage, if it's wear and tear and it happens, then fine. I have done now just short of 7,000 miles on it. But the oil sump damage itself was not just sort of chip paint, it was sort of small holes and openings into the bottom of the sump. So yes, it's disappointing that there's a couple of chips and stuff, but it is what it is. It is what it is.
Like you say, the whole rest of the bike though is absolutely stunning. To be honest, it's one of those defects where you've almost got to be dead in front of it to notice it, but I suppose when you own the bike and you love the bike, you want everything to be prim and proper, top of its class, top of its standard. Where would you line something like the Ducati Streetfighter V4S with its competitors out there?
That's a tough question. I think in terms of performance and style and ease of riding, it's really up there. The KTM Super Dukes, the Aprilias. But I think in terms of the machine, the monster that you want, it's probably not up, with the Super Duke. If you want that sort of beast power that try and rip you off, then maybe the KTM is the way to go. But in terms of, and this might be bias, your slightly more everyday ride comfort with the option of the animal, then I would say that this is probably the top runner.
This top runner, I like that. I don't mean to put you in that defensive zone where you've already said you didn't want to come on, you didn't want to defend it. Obviously, you've mentioned about sort of Ducati parts and how much that would sort of set someone back in an instance with the sump. But the bike itself obviously is no, shall we say, everyday man's price. I think it's around £19,000 for the base model and around £21,000 for the V4S model that you've brought in here. What would your thoughts be when you then compare to the prices of the Yamaha MT10, the Aprilia Torino V4, where there, even the Kawasaki supercharged ZH2, what's your thoughts originally? Not so much defence, but where that lines up.
And I won't defend what I don't think is right, because it is what it is, and I bought it because I love the bike, not that it's a perfect bike. In terms of the money for it, it is a lot of money, and there are shortcomings, and I think one of the things you might say, and it's a common sort of downfall, is for that type of money, there's a lot of plastic. There is a lot of plastic where you would expect carbon fibre. There's no fuel gauge.
Is there not? Yeah. I did not know that.
And little things like there's no sort of cruise control or any of those sort of higher functions. So the fuel gauge is what really gets to me, actually, to be fair. But
going back to the old school of opening the tank, looking inside, have I got enough to get home? And
it's a lot of that. Fortunately, they've put a light on it, so the light does come up to tell you that you're low. Some people have told me that it's 40 miles on the light, and I've heard on sort of forums and stuff that people have got 10 miles and run out. So it's something that I don't really trust, and it's that, that anxiety in the last 10 minutes of every ride I have, so it's one of those things.
You mentioned there about not necessarily trusting the light, and trust me, I am no stranger to jokes about electronic problems with my Triumph. Obviously Ducati does have a bit of a reputation for its electronic, you know, the issues that do come with it sometimes. Have you experienced any electrical issues? And if not, is it something that you potentially do worry about or did worry about when you bought the bike, or is it just something you get on with?
I think I just get on with it. Why worry about something that hasn't happened yet or will? I don't know. So hopefully not. I must admit, everything has been incredibly accurate and perfect so far. It starts on the button. I've never had any problems, and you know, the photos we're taking earlier, you know, lots of panning and stuff, and the battery was on with the lights on, and it started. It took maybe one or two jumps, but it's always started. And I think the leaps and bounds that Ducati have made in the last year or two with all the electronics, I'm sort of shyly hopeful that they've sort of ironed out some of them.
From the original, especially all those years ago, it has to be so much better than that. You've mentioned before already that, you know, it's not the perfect bike. There maybe is no such thing. You know, it could have come with some carbon fibre on the mudguards and the wings, etc. Apart from cosmetics, is there any other improvements that you would have made to this bike if you were a part of the development and production team?
I don't think so.
No?
No.
That's high praise.
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, the riding style, the way you sit on it, they've heightened and widened the bars. It's just comfort. You know, there's not that any horrible wrist pain and discomfort. It's just so comfortable, but yet there's just that machine waiting to be stretched if you want it and if you need it.
Beautiful. On a concluding note, when we started, you said you didn't see this being a bike that you would be ever able to sell. I've got to ask, why is that? Why is your relationship with the Streetfighter V4S so special? I
don't know, just every time I see it even, or I know that I'm going to go for a ride, I get all giddy. I'm like a child. You know, I says to the missus, I'll just take the bike out. And she's like, yeah, okay, cool, see you a bit later, ride safe. And then I get that weird little hop, my leather's on, my boots on, and I cannot get out the door fast enough. I love being on it. And I think that's what I love about being out on a bike, is you can have that ride and that just mental well-being, really. Yeah. I love that. That's a very beautiful way to wrap it up. It's a stunning looking bike. I thank you so much for bringing it in and telling us a bit about it, and I look forward to finding out a bit more about yourself later on. Well, thank you for having me. My motorcycle journey started one fruitful Christmas when I was about 4 years old. My dad thought, because I'd just learned how to ride a bicycle, it was a good time to buy me a little motorbike. And that was it. From there, started riding around the garden, and then that progressed to fields. And then at about the age of 6 or 7, I started riding motocross. So my motocross career started when I was about 5 or 6 years old. It started as weekend. Then I think my parents liked the social side of it as well. It became more and more regular, and then all of a sudden I started racing, and it became a bit more serious, and I joined a team. And I suppose the important backstory is that I grew up in Zimbabwe and eventually started riding motocross for Zimbabwe. It was the start of what was sort of a relatively promising motocross career as a child, but very few riders actually make it through, and my parents sort of encouraged me to go to uni, go to school, and I sort of gave it up in my early teens. People I did ride with have gone on to do some amazing things. Cam Peterson is one who's racing in Moto America in the Superbike series. David Goosen is one of the greatest motocross riders in Africa, and several others. So yeah, it was an illustrious start and something that, you know, I have fond memories of. Motocross is an epic sport. Dirt bikes, jumps, air. It's just the adrenaline of racing. It's incredible. As I've sort of grown older and we've got the opportunity to go back myself, but I don't find myself racing off to buy a motocross bike or anything like that. Like I said, it's a bit dirty and it's a bit grim, and I think that's why when I could, I bought a road bike and I sort of stuck more to the cleaner roads of Milton Keynes rather than the dirt tracks of the countryside. So some of the greatest achievements is not individual perhaps, but I was part of the Zimbabwe motocross team that went to the AMU, which is like the African Champs. I had some amazing motocross teammates, and as a team we won the series, which was an incredible achievement as probably an 8-year-old. And that was probably my biggest highlight as a motocross career. Even as a child, I think back, I think back about it, and the stuff that we did was incredible, really. My advice to someone who's never tried motocross before is it's a very different kettle of fish. It's something that I wouldn't be running back to, and it's just because, not that I don't enjoy it, I loved it, but it's tough. It's a grueling sport. The strength, the performance that you need just to keep yourself up, the skill in the body, sort of changing in the riding styles is very different. It's not like you can do a CBT on a ped and get on a motocross bike and be fine. There's a lot of learning involved with motocross. But if you have the opportunity and you've got the safety gear and you've got the bike, and do it. It's an incredible day out. The biggest influence on my life is probably my dad. He was the one that thought it was a good idea to get a 4-year-old a motorbike as a Christmas present. He was always there, sort of supporting me as a rider, as a motocross rider. Helped out with bikes, and he got my brother into it. Developed a team called Chase Racing, and it became a big thing and a big part of our lives. I think, close second would probably be my grandfather, Carlos. He lived in Harare and owned a petrol station called Chase Motors on the Chase, and they had a service sort of station, and I was always around there, and as a kid in a petrol station, and around cars and mechanics and bits of things everywhere. It was it was a real learning opportunity for me, and together those two have probably been the biggest sort of influences on my career, really. I started riding road bikes a couple of years ago, and it was not on a whim, but I was at medical school and my clinical partner had a little 125, and I was just really jealous. And I think there was a little part of me that sort of longed for the motocross days and longed for the being able to have that freedom on a motorbike and ride around. And I had then this odd experience where I was a medical student in A&E, and this guy had come in and he had fallen off his bike, and all he cared about was getting discharged so he could go for this big ride the next day. And I remembered that passion that he had. I remember having it as a kid, and I thought, no, I have to do it. And it was a couple of days later, I went home, booked my CBT, went straight into DAS, just because I didn't want to go straight to a liter bike or anything, but I wanted the opportunity. So, but that's what sort of re-sparked me and gave me that spark to go and get it all booked and sorted. I think the motorcycle culture between Zimbabwe and the UK is chalk and cheese. I don't know anyone really that rides a bike to commute or in town, and I think mainly that's because the roads aren't conducive and the driving standards probably aren't that good. Where the UK has got some of the best driving standards, and to me some of the best roads. I know people will be thinking, oh, the roads are rubbish, but comparatively so. The UK is an amazing place to ride. I think the culture is different in the sense that motorbikes are motorsport. It's a hobby. People do enduro, motocross, supercross. Guys that I used to race motocross with, the Thixton brothers, they're training to the Dakar in 2023. It's that kind of riding, where the UK is more sort of clubs, groups, and they go out for a Sunday stroll or a cafe run or a breakfast run. So they are very different sort of cultures. I think my craziest experience of motorcycles in general is probably quite tame. I don't think I have got any real sort of stories, which in a way is a bit of a blessing. Hopefully in a year or so I will have an epic story, and it's because I'm hopefully going to replicate a trip some friends did a couple of years ago, where they rode from London to Cape Town. I think they were African twins. And there were just two of them, and they went on this 3-month trip from, like I said, Cape Town, from London all the way down to Cape Town. And it's something that I was really jealous of, and something that I've been planning quietly for a long time. But now that I've said it, I suppose I have to do it. I think the risks of motorcycling are there. They're always going to be there, but there's risks in life, and everything comes with risk. I think there's a way that you minimize risk, and I would encourage you to buy a good helmet, buy good kit, When you go on your CBT or you do your training course, pay attention, learn where to be on the road, and you practice those things that will make you as safe as possible. But in terms of, mitigating all of the risk, you can't. Life is full of risk. And as a doctor for the NHS, I've seen A&E patients come in from the 50cc PEDs to the 1 litre full kit, and the range of injuries is not specific. So you have people that have minor injuries and they've come off at really high speeds, or you've had someone on the opposite end, a little bump in a car park and they've really hurt themselves. I'm not all about fate, but I think what will be, and there's nothing that you can really do other than sort of minimise the things you can.
So a lovely message from Andy there, that we should never let the risks, dangers or fears stop us from what we love doing in life. This episode was brought to you by you, the viewers. I want to say a huge thank you to everybody who has supported the channel, watched the videos and brought any of our merchandise. Remember, you guys can also purchase some merchandise in the links below, and it all goes a long way to helping us bring these episodes to you. Remember, we would love to have you here as a guest on Wolf Tales with your pride and joy, telling us all about your crazy experiences through your motorcycle journey. I am the Rhythmic Biker, and these are the Wolf Tales. These are the Wolf Tales.